My pranams at the feet of our loving Lord and Master Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba. Sai Ram to you all. My journey to Sai came to its first climax when I travelled to see Swami in person and receive his darshan in 1998. Looking back now, I can see that my journey to Sai started out the moment that I was born, and perhaps even before then. Other journeys to Sai that I have listened to over the years are many and varied, and mine, I think, is a part of the same rich diversity that is the tapestry of Sai. About 10 years ago, I decided that it would be a shame if my story were to be lost to the world when I eventually take my leave, and so I set about writing a book recounting my story. It was an endeavour that progressed in fits and starts over successive years, but I finally completed it shortly after retiring. The book is entitled Walking Sunward, and it tells the story of my life up to and including the 3 visits that I made to see Swami, each visit seemingly building on the last. The book also contains a series of articles that I wrote about my visits. At the time of my first visit to Puttaparthi, I had become the editor of the Sai Newsletter in Scotland, and so I used the opportunity to create a series of short articles that I could include in the newsletter at the rate of 1 per month, and which would provide interest and a light-hearted view of a visit to India and a stay at the ashram. What follows is the first article that I wrote. It is entitled Waiting for God. On a cold and damp Saturday morning in Glasgow, Arthur, Malcolm and I are gathered in a cafe in order to discuss the preparations for our coming visit to the Prasanthi Nilayam Ashram at Puttaparthi. Our transactions at the travel agent are complete, and we have made our way here for warmth and a cup of tea. We sit down at a vacant table, and glancing around I notice 2 baths placed incongruously in the corners of the cafe. One bath containing potted plants arranged in a peat bed, and the other goldfish. I examine the bath-cum aquarium with interest and conclude after a short assessment that the gravel filtration is up to the job. The fish should thrive well enough in there. But Arthur quickly stops my mind from wandering any further and draws it back to the matter in hand. He says that Baba tends to test people before they visit. I nod sagely, as I had heard this before. Our conversation then turns to India, and I confirm that this is to be my first visit, as I didn't think spending a few hours in a transit lounge when flying through to Singapore as a teenager really counted. "You've got to queue for everything," says Arthur. "There'll be plenty of waiting around, and there's nothing to be gained by making a fuss. You've just got to go with the flow. Just think of it as one of Swami's tests." I understand what Arthur is telling me. During my travels in the military, I had frequently come up against red tape, and I had learned 1 or 2 stratagems for speeding things along. Not that they were going to work this time. Nevertheless, to be forewarned is to be forearmed, and I was content to let go and leave it to God. Sure enough, after landing in Mumbai, we are met by 6 long queues to get through immigration. Only for a second did a fleeting bout of impatience rise to the surface before I drove it away for a 6 on the boundary. I relaxed, and I remained content to drop into a gentle contemplation whilst observing the people around me. Even at the passport booth, I let the official get on and finish his business without following his every move. I just stood there and thought about other, weightier matters. Easy peasy. After that, it was smiling my way through the queues for the collection of the baggage, changing the money, finding a hotel at the tourist counter, and then through customs. "I've never known it to be so quick," says Arthur. By the time we get to Puttaparthi, I'm an expert at this queuing business. I did have my moment, though. On arrival at registration in the ashram, we join a queue, of course. This will be a 45-minute one, I think, but we should be in good time still for darshan. With my newfound skill, the assessment I make is accurate, and once more I take pleasure in observing the comings and goings around me. Arthur, who is in the queue whilst I watch from a distance, eventually completes the business and says, "That's all done, now for public relations." We collect our baggage and turn a corner, and there before us is another 45-minute queue that we will have to work our way through. "Apparently they've got to check the registration details," says Arthur. "Cheer up though, we've only got the queue at the accommodation office after this." Looking back, I see that we spent most of our 2 week waiting for something. Waiting to queue, waiting for Swami, waiting for the canteen to open, waiting to cash a traveller's cheque, and in those days, waiting for the telephone. And yet, this was the very time that much of our spiritual homework got done, as our thoughts ranged across our own personal endeavours. Without this waiting, the good progress that we achieved would not have been gained. It's a bit like life, really. You just need to let go and stay in the moment. I'm glad to say that we made it through all the queues of that first day in the ashram, and we arrived in darshan in time for our first glance of Swami, which made it all worthwhile. As you might imagine, we subsequently became quite adept at queuing. However, I never really quite got used to a determined Arthur stepping out and striding purposely through the ashram in the cool of the very early morning towards the mandir for darshan, whilst Malcolm and I skipped along behind, just trying our best to keep up. And all just to join another queue. Sai Ram.